Yep. Okay, thank you, Sandy.
Probably thought we forgot him.
Yes,
Okay, we're about ready to start. I wanted to get you on the line with us.
great, thanks for calling, Sandy.
Welcome. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education. Sandy, will you call the roll?
Albright. Here. Belleville.
Here.
Benford. Fuqua.
Here.
Myers. Reed.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
At this special meeting of the Board of Education held on September 5th, 2013, the board adopted a resolution canceling the school board election and declaring the following individuals elected by acclamation: Christina Marquez, Director District B, Tom Myers, Director District E, and Jenny Belval, Director District F. Right now, we'd like to proceed with the oath of office, and we have Judge Ingrid Backey with us tonight to administer the oath. We start alphabetically, so.
I think we start with Tina.
Okay. Christina. All right. So Christina Marquez, could you please?
That I will faithfully perform the duties
That I will faithfully perform the duties
of the office of Director of the Boulder Valley School District, RE2,
of the office of Director of the Boulder Valley School District RE2
in the counties of Boulder, Broomfield, and Gilpin,
and the counties of Boulder, Broomfield, and Gilpin,
as required by law,
as required by law,
and I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
and the laws made pursuant thereto.
and the laws made pursuant thereto.
All right. Sign right there. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Jeannie Bevel? Here. Oh, I'm re-swearing you in, right? You've done this before.
That doesn't mean I remember.
Okay. And I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your last name?
Jenny Belval.
Belval. I, Jenny Belval,
I, Jenny Belval,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully perform the duties
that I will faithfully perform the duties
of the office of Director of the Boulder Valley School District, RE2,
of the office of the Director of the Boulder Valley School District RE2
in the counties of Boulder, Broomfield, and Gilpin,
in the counties of Boulder, Broomfield, and Gilpin,
as required by law,
as required by law,
and I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
Constitution of the State of Colorado,
and the laws made pursuant thereto.
and the laws made pursuant thereto.
Congratulations again.
Tom Myers was called away on business this week, and he received his oath of office last Friday. I'd like to, at this point, thank the judge for coming out and helping us tonight. Welcome our newest member, and welcome back, Jenny and Tom. So on our schedule now, it's a break, but the chair would entertain a motion. Lori.
Given that Tom is not here today, I move that the Board of Education postpone the remaining action items on the organizational meeting agenda, specifically, 1, the election and appointment of officers, 2, resolution for use of facsimile signature, and 3, affidavit concerning awareness of and compliance with confidentiality of executive session to a special meeting to be held on Tuesday, November 19th, 2013, at 6 p.m. at this same room at 6500 Arapahoe in Boulder, zip code 80303.
Do I hear a second? Sam? Is there any discussion on the motion? Oh, is the motion 4 p.m.? 4 p.m.
Excuse me, 4 p.m.
Okay.
That's why it's a blank. I thought we were meeting at 6, sorry.
So without any, oh, Laura.
I just think it's really important to have everybody be here for these important elections, and I think it's great to postpone it here.
I concur. I'm glad we're able to find a time when we can all be physically here. So without further discussion, Sandy, would you call the vote?
Albright?
Yes?
Belleville?
Yes.
Benford? Fuqua?
Yes.
Myers? Reed?
Yes.
Yes.
And Smith. Actually, I don't know Leslie anymore. The motion passes.
All right, thank you. So, make sure. That takes us to the adjournment of our special meeting, and now we'll take that quick break. So, thank you.
How long do we have?
Let's do 5 minutes.
Okay, so Tom, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. Do you-
So I'd like to call to order the November 12th, 2013 regular meeting of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education. Sandy, will you call the roll?
Here.
Here. Here. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remind those tonight that the new vision of the Boulder Valley School District is we develop our children's greatest abilities and make possible the discovery and pursuit of their dreams, which when fulfilled will benefit us all. We provide a comprehensive and innovative approach to education and graduate successful, curious, lifelong learners who confidently confront the great challenges of their time. In support of that vision, let's start with our first item, the superintendent's report. Dr. Messenger.
Good evening, President Reed and members of the board, and congratulations, Tina. Welcome to our governing team. I have a few items I'd like to touch on this evening, and of course, I'd be glad to answer any questions on these topics or others if you're interested. So last week, before the Joint Budget Committee, the governor introduced and his governor staff introduced the proposed budget for the upcoming year. And of course, a part of that is education. So if you caught all that in the news, what's being proposed by the governor is a 2.6%, initially a 2.6% cost of living adjustment for school funding and also for growth, which is estimated to be about $233 per student. And so that's a starting point as we begin this next legislative session. The proposed education budget is not proportionate to the growth of the overall state budget. It is a smaller part than it is, and it reduces a percentage of the whole. So obviously, we've got some work to do, and we'll go to try to secure additional funding in addition to what the governor has proposed. I serve as co-chair of the Colorado Association of School Executives Legislative Committee, and we'll be convening our first meeting on November 22nd. Some of our work will be debriefing on the most recent amendment vote and also preparing for the upcoming session, which of course will include school funding and some of the topics we're likely to visit about later this evening in our look at our own legislative platform. So that's some work that's going on right now that I personally will be involved in. Also, just want to remind you, I think we've sent this note out, next Tuesday, a week from today on the 19th at 7:30 a.m., the Public Education and Business Coalition will be hosting a superintendent's forum. So the superintendents in the immediate suburban urban area were invited to participate, and they all agreed. So it'll be quite a collection of superintendents, of which I will be one. So if you would like to attend that session, let Sandy know, and she'll make sure you're registered. If not, we'll give you an update and let you know how it goes. We've received a set of topics that we'll be visiting about, received that email today. So it'll be a facilitated session with the superintendents, with educators in the business community in attendance. I've recently been nominated and invited to join a group called the Suburban Superintendents from across the country. These are superintendents of school districts that whose districts reside near large urban metro areas. So I attended meetings at the end of last week and into the weekend with this group of less than 100 school leaders from across the country. The topic was around digital learning and personalizing education for students and looking at alternative pathways through and to graduation. So really nice alignment with the work that we worked on last year and the goals we embraced this spring and the strategic planning work we're doing. So it was a productive conference, created a nice new set of network of folks that are doing similar tasks, doing similar work across the country. So I'll keep you informed as we continue that work. And I think some of the readings you might also find engaging as well. So that would conclude my report. President Reed, and I'd be glad to answer questions about those topics or any others. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Messenger. So we'll move to our next item. We'll excuse the students tonight. We don't see them. So then we can move to our public hearing and public participation. So the board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board please confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking to non-agenda items. Please recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. We have a lighting system on our podium. It turns green when your 2 minutes starts. It will turn amber with about 30 seconds remaining, and will turn red and give you a beep when your 2 minutes are up. Tonight we have 2 speakers signed up, one on agenda items, so we'll start there. It's Marla Dowell, followed then by Barbara Case. Marla?
So where's the light? I still don't see it. Sorry. Oh, maybe. There it is. Okay, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay, hello, my name is Marla Dowell. I'm a BVSD parent serving on the BVSD Talented and Gifted District Advisory Committee this academic year, and I'm here to speak on the agenda item on advanced academic services. I'm speaking here as both a parent and an employer. I've employed BVSD high school students as well as CU undergraduate and graduate students in my lab. I'm a physicist by profession. Specifically, what I'd like to call to your attention is during Jennifer's presentation, she'll be talking about the AAS response to the Colorado Gifted Evaluation recommendation finding. And in this, her response, they're focusing on the personnel issues. And what I'd like you to do is to look at the report, and in the report, they actually highlight 3 areas where the district is not meeting the state requirements for gifted and talented education. Those 2 other areas, in addition to personnel, are programming and evaluation and accountability. The reason why I feel that these other issues are important as well is because I care passionately about having TAG programs accessible to all of our students and not just the sort of usual TAG program students. The reason why this is important as an employer is that if students are not on an accelerated math track, by the time they reach middle school, they will not be able to major in STEM majors in college by the time they get to college. So we need to make sure that these programs are accessible to all students. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next speaker is Barbara Case.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Ellwanger Case, and I am the president of the Boulder Valley Parent Educator Association. It's nice to be here with the board, President Reed, Dr. Messenger, and your staff. On November 20th is National Educational Support Professionals Day, and we would be pleased if you could acknowledge the ESPs in the buildings in their morning announcements. So if you could have the principals, just take a note to acknowledge what an ESP does in the buildings. According to the CEA, we help students be safe, healthy, and ready to learn. An ESP is all those little positions that we never think about. It's the bus driver, it's the aide on the bus, it's the food service worker, the custodians, the special ed paras, excuse me, educational interpreters, the early childhood education specialists. So we run the gamut of services that people need to succeed in our educational system. So when people ask me what does an ESP do, I tell them that we are the ones that make education accessible to all. So again, I'm asking you for your support in having the principals acknowledge the ESPs in their building on or before November 20th. Thank you.
Thank you. And that will conclude public hearing and participation tonight. And so we can move directly to board communication. Board members. Sam.
Well, thanks to Ms. Case for bringing up paraprofessionals, and I would love to support that effort to recognize them before on November 20th, because they're so important to our district. So thank you, and thanks to all the paras. I just want to say I was out at Centaurus High School with Principal Rhonda Hannaford and Deirdre Pilch, my first visit there, and very exciting to see the strong enrollment in the engineering academy there, to hear about some of the challenges they have regarding differentiated learning at Centaurus, and also to get a look at the building in preparation for some of our SIPSI work. So really good visit to Centaurus, and if you haven't been, I encourage you to take a look.
Thank you, Sam. Any other board members? No? Jenny?
So I'd like to thank the speakers that came tonight. I'm looking forward to our discussion on from Advanced Academic Services, so I hope you'll stay for that. And I also thank Barbara Case for coming. I think we should honor our ESPs, and so I hope we'll do that. And I'd like to point out that our tag personnel in our buildings are actually or ESPs and not generally teachers. So it would be nice to have them honored as well. So I also wanted to sort of let the board know, Shelley and I both attended the Teacher Principal Effectiveness Committee, which was October the 24th, and that group continues its work. As you know, we have a plan going forward for this year, but there's still a good deal of work that needs to be done around how to exactly use the rubrics, or at least score the rubric. I mean, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. It's a little surprising. So and there was a report in the Friday report that sort of updated everybody. So I hope everybody will take a look at that. It's again a great group of people that are working on it. A great group of staff. I'm always honored to have people like that in our school district. And then I'd sort of like to comment, just so board members know, that with the legislative session coming up and with our workshop on with our legislators coming up next week, that Office of Communications and Briggs do put out a weekly newsletter on what's going on in the legislature. So if you're interested, and I'm not sure, Briggs, if you send that to everybody on the board automatically or just to the legislative liaisons, but if you don't, then if people are interested in getting it, that's available and something that you might want to. And we also have had some updates starting to get updates from our lobbyists, so if anybody's interested in those and is not getting them, I'd be happy to share, and I'm sure Lori would too, so just sort of an FYI thing. I think that the latest update from our lobbyists led me to believe that this could be, this next legislative session could be kind of a roller coaster ride and really interesting dynamics, so it bears watching. So then I would like to comment. What I really want to talk about, though, is I spent a long time at Broomfield High School, and those of you who know me know, of course, that I'm from Broomfield, and my kids went to Broomfield, and I always enjoy going back to Broomfield High School. But the thing that I really wanted to mention this time was that one of the things that came up, that always comes up in our conversations with the community, is the idea of promoting community partnerships, with school community partnerships. And I would like to say that Broomfield Heights, or what I saw at Broomfield High School this year, tells me that there's some really excellent stuff going on. So Broomfield High School is right across from the Methodist Church in Broomfield, right across the street. And so the church has really partnered with the school in ways that I think, I know this is not the only faith community in our district that does partner with schools, but I think that since this is what I know about this week, this is the one I'll talk about. They feed kids lunch for a really nominal fee once a week, and they have for years, and the community all calls it Jesus Pizza, but it's a nice, I always have thought it was a nice service because it sort of like a training in open campus, so the kids could just walk across the street for lunch and sort of practice practice using, you know, abiding by the open campus rules and kind of a safe environment. So I always thought that was a good service, and I think they've expanded that service, so now they serve burritos a couple of days a week. No speculation on what they call that. And then they also have, you know, they've also opened up a after-school program for kids. And this week I attended a meeting where they were working with the city and the school district around behavior of kids in the parking lot there, and the way that the school and the church worked was really inspiring. The other partnership I'd like to applaud is the SRO program. I think that all of our communities provide SROs. Am I right about that, Bruce? For schools, and I have read studies and been a little concerned that the presence of police officers in schools can sometimes result in the criminalization of student behavior that is really, well, there was a study about that last year, and so I was a little worried about that, but it's clear to me from the conversation with this school resource officer in Broomfield, and I'm sure it's true in our other communities, that that's not what's going on with this program in our schools, that it's really a fine program, and that the police officer who's there develops good, strong relationships with kids and is really about protecting kids from themselves, sometimes from their own bad decisions. And so I would just like to applaud some of those relationships that our high school is cultivating with both the city and with the neighbors across the street, because I think that's an excellent example of how we can partner with the community to improve outcomes for our kids.
Thank you, Jenny. So, well, I'd like to welcome Tina to the board. Thank you for your service on DAC, and thank you in advance for your service on the board. We'll try and make it interesting. I joined Sam and Jenny in support of the ESPs as well. I think it's accurately named. I think most of those folks mentioned have ESP. They certainly do to have to keep up with my daughters. I apologize. Dr. Messenger, is there a way we can go about making that happen?
So yeah, we exchanged emails this afternoon. We'll send out a message. We have a weekly communique with our building administrators, so we'll provide them the information they need and encourage them to do just that. So we'll follow up. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Messenger. So with that, I'll keep it brief, and we can move to our first information item, update from Advanced Academic Services. Dr. Messenger?
I'll do a brief introduction as Jen Barr makes her way to the podium. Jen's our Director for Advanced Academic Services, and upon the request of the board, you were briefed in the late spring, early summer, I believe it was, about the review that was mentioned earlier this evening, and so you asked that we would come forward and share with you an update. So Jen, under Jen's leadership, and Dr. Ron Cabrera, our Assistant Superintendent for Instructional Service and Equity, they've been working together to prepare this presentation. So it'll be a brief overview. It was included as an attachment to your electronic agenda, and I know they would be looking forward to questions or comment once they finish the presentation. So Jen and Ron, thank you for being here this evening.
Good evening, President Reed, members of the board, Dr. Messenger. Thank you for having us this evening. We're pleased in your interest in academic advanced services and want to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about our work. So as Dr. Messenger indicated, I'm Ron Cabrera, Assistant Superintendent for Instructional Services and Equity, and it's certainly my pleasure to work with my colleague, Jen Barr, who will give us a little bit more detail. We'll have an opportunity for some conversation as we go along. So Jen?
Thank you. Good evening. Sandy, quick question. Will the PowerPoint be here? I have it here. Do you want me to do that? Okay. Great. Sorry, we didn't work this out ahead of time.
Let me make sure that they can see it. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Thank you for your patience.
Okay.
Oh, we can see it.
I can see it, but you can't. Is it there? Okay. Thanks for your patience. Oh, look. Fantastic. So, thanks again for the introduction, Dr. Messenger. Tonight, we'll just give you a brief overview of our work thus far on the Colorado Gifted Education Review findings and the improvement planning that accompanies that. At the end of the report, we're happy to hear your comments and answer any questions that you might have. Last April, a team of gifted education leaders from the CDE Office of Gifted Education visited the BVSD through a process called the Colorado Gifted Education Review, or CGIR. Before the team arrived, they reviewed desk audit materials, which included state reports, school and district level data, communications, policies, and budget reports. Once the team arrived on site, they met with stakeholders in gifted education through focus groups, site visits to schools, and interviews with students, teachers, talented and gifted advisors, administrators, and parents. The team then compiled their findings in a full report, which was received in June. That report was shared with the board members through an information item. It's also posted on our Talented and Gifted website. You're welcome to read the full report if you'd like to do that. And although there were commendations in the report, as Marla mentioned, and thank you, Marla, for speaking earlier and for being on the District Advisory Committee, 3 components were identified as areas for future development. In other words, the BVSD is not yet meeting all of the state programming requirements in these 3 areas. So we do have some work to do in programming, evaluation and accountability, and personnel. So once I received the report, the next step was to begin the improvement planning process. To begin that, I collaborated with both CDE and Boulder Valley School District leaders and the Talented and Gifted District Advisory Committee. And we decided to focus our improvement planning this school year on personnel. The reason for that is we really wanted to connect and tie our work closely into educator effectiveness work and the BVSD strategic plan, as well as the board's mission, vision, and goals. So as we help educators and administrators figure out what effective instruction looks like for gifted learners, it's important that our improvement planning and goals are seen as an integral part of effective instruction, not as a disconnected sort of more work add-on. So the actual report identified 2 next steps or areas of improvement related to personnel. The first is to ensure that principals and teachers have the necessary professional development in place to support gifted learners. And second, evaluating the effectiveness of our current staffing model. So again, our improvement planning and implementation will explicitly connect the BVSD effective teacher standards to the CDE gifted education personnel indicators. There's much overlap between what the CDE recommends for gifted education personnel and the BVSD effective teacher standards. In particular, Standard 2, elements C, D, and F are quite applicable. So let's look at one of these. If you compare the BVSD effective teacher standard 2, element D, which is on top there, about adapting teaching to meet student needs, you'll find a direct correlation to the CDE gifted education personnel indicator about adapting instruction to meet student needs. So it's important to us as we help improve personnel that we make some explicit connections.
So as Jennifer has alluded to, there's been kind of ongoing work going on with, based on the findings that we've had from the Seeger report. As you can see, we're in the process of collecting and analyzing data to determine current program effectiveness as needs, following up on the information that had been presented to us. And we're trying to align our work in a very coherent fashion with what we're doing with educator effectiveness. We're certainly waiting to see how things unfold with the strategic planning process and certainly trying to maintain a unified strand within it. And we believe that advanced academic services ought not be seen as an outlier, but a coherent process in terms of providing effective instruction throughout the district and effective and coherent programming. So in brief, that is what we are seeing our work moving towards. We'll certainly amplify it as we get more information and position ourselves for ongoing work for the coming year.
So in closing, thanks again for your interest in our work and your support of what we're doing. And at this time, we welcome any comments or questions on the information.
Thank you for the presentation. Board members, comments or questions? Shelley?
So thank you for that. I can certainly understand why you'd want to start with personnel. That makes a lot of sense to me, given what we're doing with educator effectiveness. But I'm not quite clear on what will be the case with programming and evaluation, the other two areas that were identified. What does the district have in mind for meeting those improvement requirements?
Those are great questions. So the actual report is broken out into each section. There's 10 indicators from the CDE. So evaluation, accountability, programming, and personnel were the 3 that we were directed to focus on. So under each of those 3, there's some specific things that we need to look at and some specific recommendations. I can give you a summary of what we're planning to do with those if you'd like that, if the entire board would like that, if that would make more sense. But our approach was to tackle personnel first so that we could do a better job with evaluation and accountability as well as the programming pieces. So we're not ignoring those. We're not planning to set them aside. We're starting where we hope to get some traction first, if that makes sense.
Dr. Messenger?
So I might just use this opportunity to give some additional context around the strategic planning process. So what we've mentioned briefly in just talking about the planning process is that as we form action teams to work in specific areas, be it literacy, English language learners, talented and gifted, then develop action steps, timeline, who's responsible, how we'll evaluate, in this case, personnel, the work that we've done there, and program evaluation. So what I anticipate is the work activity around addressing all 3 of these areas will be then embedded, and so it will be the work that guides Jen and her leadership and her team, and having the advisory committee is also a really good opportunity. It will be my plan that each of these action teams, in this case Talented and Gifted, will have a representative advisory group, and we already have one in this case, so that it isn't just staff that oversees this work, that we'll have a representative group of parents, educators, and others that will help provide input and also oversight as we work through. So as this progresses, we'll be able to build a timeline, and there may well be recommendations that come from this. In this case with personnel, it could be around professional development, et cetera. Program evaluation enhancement, there could be likely be other recommendations. Some of those might have budgetary implications. Some of them might have other program implications, of which we'd bring back to the board, particularly if it's in the venue of planning resources and setting priorities. So I think this is actually a really good example of work that's already started that'll fit nicely into our planning process as we go forward. And as you know, there are other areas as well. So, but again, as Jen mentioned, this review and work with personnel will be first, partly because of the alignment with our educator effectiveness work, which is really critical right now as well.
And
Shelley,
Shelley, to follow up with that, the other piece that I can't promise will happen this year, but I'm hoping will happen this year is the evaluation and accountability piece. The CDE is piloting sort of a new way to come in and do a more heavy-handed audit and less of a friendly review, which is what this is. Mm-hmm. And I have volunteered to try that out if they're really piloting it. So we might have an opportunity this school year to get more of that evaluation and accountability piece done. I just don't know that it's going to happen yet. So that would be next on my list, if that helps answer your question about priorities.
Yeah, thank you. My next question actually was that
Okay.
it looks like the state gave you a timeline
Yes.
for this, and then we have a strategic planning timeline, and I just
Right.
wondered if those two were going to mesh.
We're
well.
going to try to make them mesh. The state gifted office has been incredibly flexible and responsive to the suggestions of my district advisory committee and others that I work with, Dr. Cabrera, even in the question, can we start by focusing on personnel? Do we have to address all 3 of these right away? Mm-hmm. And they actually thought it was a really solid idea to start with personnel. So just to understand the CDE's review process, it's a lot less, it's dissimilar than a special education review where there are compliance laws, mandates, and things like that. It's a lot gentler, but that doesn't mean that there are areas that we don't need to work on.
Yeah, the actual report is confusing in that way. Sometimes it sounds gentle, and sometimes it sounds like they want things done right away. So I'm glad you have a handle on what they really mean.
Thank you.
It's good. So, Thank you.
Thanks.
If I could just piggyback on some of Jen's statements, so, and recast it a little bit. So, as opposed to heavy-handed, let's say a deeper look into some of our activities that we do in terms of program implementation. And, you know, in terms of strategic planning process, what I think we want to get out of this, both in these three different categories and expansion, is to say, how do we need to position ourselves from 2014 on, both in terms of strategic use of financial and personnel allocations, what other additional, personnel-wise we're talking about, you know, what's the right training? You know, I think the bold vision of this board is to provide a very successful learning experiences of all our kids, regardless of where their starting point is. And really, that's what we're trying to ameliorate with these services as well as other services out of instructional services at this point. So I hope I didn't overstate it, but in any case, Jen's got a good handle on it. So.
Thank you. Jenny?
Well, I'm really excited about this because I think it's the first system-wide look we've had at gifted and talented education since I've been in the district. And as I read the report, I sort of sensed this feeling that one of the issues that we faced in our district was a lack of consistency from classroom to classroom and from school to school. So what I guess I would kind of like, and I agree with the philosophy, it makes a good deal of sense to me to start with the instructors, and because you can't do anything in the other areas if you don't have personnel that are capable of delivering the program. So I think that's a great philosophy, which I support. So I guess one of my questions would be I'd like an assurance that senior administration is on board with this, and so that we can look forward to a time in the not too distant future when offering gifted and talented programming for gifted and talented students is not optional at the teacher's discretion, but we actually expect it to happen.
We're not in disagreement.
Well, I think you can have that assurance. I think, without going off the topic of this evening's presentation, although I think it's related, is that, well, particularly you and Shelley are working on this educator effectiveness. The responsibility for differentiating, instructing, and meeting students' need doesn't rest, obviously, just with those who work in the talented and gifted program. So part of the expectation around the educator effectiveness standards, our own standards, as we develop those, is really what's our collective responsibility. So I think a commitment to the program review and the work we've talked about. But as we know, it's much bigger than that. It really is every classroom in the district. How do we do that? As Ron mentioned, for all types of learners, so they're successful, which clearly includes those who are identified for talented and gifted services. So I think as we go forward and we embrace these expectations and the professional development systems that support that, that's a standard we should hold ourselves to, and I look forward to that opportunity.
And then you touched on something that I'd also like to underline, which is sort of partnering with parents. I'm really glad there are going to be parents that you're working with your TAG DAC, which has parents on it, I know, and teachers, and that we partner with parents, because sometimes that, in my experience in the district, sometimes the input of parents of gifted children can be discounted, and so, but they have a lot to offer. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really glad that you're doing that, and I'd like to support that. And so, thank you.
Sam?
This is just a piece I was talking about with Ms. Dowell, who spoke to this topic earlier, how and when we identify kids. And most kids are identified early in elementary school, and some kids may manifest their talents and gifts later because they didn't have preschool or they had a less engaged parent, family environment. As part of this reevaluation, are we going to improve the way we can identify kids as talented and gifted after, third grade?
We certainly could. So our current policy and practice says that we identify students grades K through 12. But you are correct. If you look at the identification data and when it happens, it tends to happen second or third grade for most students. So that would fall under programming. And what the state wants to see us do, and really what best practice in gifted education says we should do, is have assessment and identification never be a short window that you have to do it right now and you miss it and it's gone. It should be ongoing. It should meet the needs of students whose gifts and talents show up later, and the programming should be responsive to those strengths when they show up. So absolutely, that could be something that we look at with programming. Thanks.
Thanks. I guess my question, it kind of sort of was answered, but I guess this is more big picture. As a board and as a community, we've talked about TAG for a long time. Are there things that we could be doing to better support your work? I know it's a loaded question, but I would like to, I know funding's always tight, so that's certainly one, but are there other things we could be doing?
Well, beyond time and money, I think we have all the right policies. So that's the good news. I think, Shelley, you may have alluded to it, or Jen, I forget whom, but we need to have some consistency in terms of in implementing existing policy. That'll address part of Sam's question about our ongoing assessment of kids. So that's part of our process of improvement too. Should it require some additional support, financial or human resource, we'll let you know. But I think we want to do it in the gestalt, not just a single component.
Okay, thank you for the answer, but through Dr. Messenger, let us know.
Yeah, I would just say, so this will be a consistent pattern, I think you'll hear, is that really before we come to the board and ask for new resources or a reallocation of resources, I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we're effectively and efficiently using the resources that have been allocated to a program, whether it's literacy or talented and gifted or English language learners. So, I want to be confident we have our house in order. And then if we really can't satisfy the expectations of the community or the governing board because we don't have enough time or resources, then we'll come and ask for that. But I think it would be premature for us to do that until we've really made sure that we are where we need to be with our program and service delivery model. And I think that's work we know we need to do in this area and other areas as well. And those will be some of the early phases work we'll be doing in the strategic plan, is really, again, looking and evaluating our own programs for effectiveness, best practices, watch that over time, and then we may need more time and resources. So we'll be back if we do.
All right, thank you, Dr. Messenger. Thank you for the presentation. Oh, Jenny, sorry.
A reminder, somebody reminded me not too long ago, maybe last week or the week before, that we had a mill levy override back in 2002? When was it, Jen? Where the district promised its voters that we would hire 8 full-time TAG certified teachers for this district, and we never did that. So just reminding people.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. So thank you again.
Thank you.
We'll move to our next information item, the Capital Improvements Planning Committee update.
So we have two really talented presenters this evening. Fran Ryan, who's Executive Director of Impact on Education and is co-chair for the CIPSE Committee, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, along with Adam Fowles, who you know to be the principal at Louisville Middle School. As staffing, Don Orr, Assistant Superintendent for Operations, has provided guidance to this group, but they early on in the process elected co-chairs. And so our commitment to the board in planning for this evening was 2 times during the year we would give live updates, a face-to-face update. So this is the first of those, and you will receive written monthly updates that Susan Cousins and Don Orr will prepare that will reflect the work of the committee. So they have a presentation they'd like to share with you, and again, like the others, we would welcome questions once they conclude. So, Fran Ryan.
Thank you, Dr. Messenger and Board of Education. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'd like to compliment staff, Don Orr and Susan Cousins, on providing a framework for the committee to get going and all the hard work that they've put into it. And we have a couple of other committee members here, Amanda Crisip and Jean Paxton, an alum of the school board. So I'd like to acknowledge that they're here tonight also. So last spring, you created and appointed members to a capital improvement planning committee. And the purpose of the committee is to come back and advise you as a Board of Education on issues and topics regarding the condition of our educational facilities and the long-term needs of our school district. So CIPSE, which is the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, so you'll hear us be chairs of CIPSE. We have been working with the district staff to identify what those needs are and then to prioritize the improvements and to put that into the educational master plan and update that. We have a 30-member committee of members that are made up of principals, teachers. We have community members with professional background in construction, in IT, real estate, business, engineering, architecture, green building, and we have somebody that's representing the nonprofit sector. Can't imagine who that is. We've worked fast, we've worked hard, we've been strategic. We've accomplished a lot in a short period of time. The early meetings of CIPSE really focused on the background information that staff had been gathering on the condition of the facilities, and that they very early on this past summer did an assessment and has shared that information with all our school principals. They are now putting that data into our software and have begun to work on pricing. And we're not even close to be able to report on anything like that yet. The district project managers, and I see that Mr. Compton is here with us tonight also, they have been working with the principals also this fall on the educational adequacy of their buildings. So in other words, how their individual school building wraps around the educational purpose and program of what they're providing. And the conversation is really taking place in the context of what type of innovation in instructional strategies are needed to align to the educational purpose of that school building. And this is a really important focus of CIPSE this year, is to really look at how our buildings are supporting what we're delivering in the buildings. We have established 6 subcommittees to take a broader and closer look at topics and issues that go beyond the individual schools. So we have subcommittees on athletics, educational technology, enrollment growth, program expansion, safety and security, IT, and then district-wide needs, which includes a discussion about this campus, the Ed Center, the transportation, a central kitchen, and special education, our special education program. We've had our first subcommittee reports out in October and November and should have that information concluded by our December meeting. We have been meeting. Adam hosted one of our meetings at Louisville Middle. We've met at Creekside Elementary School, and our future meetings will be held at Centaurus, Fairview, and Bear Creek. Those principals don't know that yet, but we'll be knocking on their door. They do now, because I know they're watching this. So we've organized ourselves, and we've thought about this master plan in terms of buckets. I like buckets, so we're looking at the condition of our facilities, roofs, boilers, windows, doors, all of those really exciting things, but things that we really need. And then a bucket of educational adequacy and innovation, and then finally, what are our district-wide needs? So that's the structure of how we're organized and how we're leading our subcommittees. And I'd like to introduce Adam Fells, one of our esteemed principals, and we're lucky to have Adam. He has a long career with our school district and not only brings a focus from the middle school, but a broader focus on the educational program and innovation. And he's a great co-chair.
Thanks, Fran. As you know, when Fran co-chairs or chairs a committee, the job gets done. So you guys are in good hands. One of the other buckets that we probably should let you know about that's probably in the focus of the board is our East County growth. So one of our tasks is to look at that bucket and what will that potential campus look like, if it needs to look like anything. We're talking about that Erie, East County area. I think it's important to give you guys a timeline to know not just where we've been, but where we're trying to go as a committee. As I look forward to December, we really need to be sure that our subcommittees have had a chance to finish all reporting. So we still have one more subcommittee to report out. Then you have to have a time for the larger committee to process all of these subcommittee reports, which is that give and take between these volunteers and staff members. That's probably going to take us through January. And I anticipate, as a co-chair, having 2 meetings in January just to process these subcommittee draft reports before we do anything with those. Then I think we have to look at the February, March time as a time to really prioritize what's percolating up. And that's probably the whole February meeting will be about creating a prioritization process and maybe even seeing what are those priorities and putting those on paper to pencil, pencil to paper, and then posting those. Then we need to really get to a master plan. And we need to draft a sort of master plan as a committee to present to the board. I anticipate that to be in the March time, where we as a larger committee do that, and then we probably review that before presenting it to you in April. Our goal would be to present this formal master plan after it's been percolating in the hopper and getting it vetted by the committee and staff for a May presentation, a more formal presentation. That would be our goal. So hopefully, with the work of Dr. Messenger, we can come to some board resolution maybe as in time in August, if that fits your timeline. That would be our goal. So with that in mind, do you have any questions about the timeline and the process?
I don't think so. If there's
Okay.
more.
If you think of one, we'll stay up here for one as I'm concluding the report. I think the last part that we really want to emphasize to the board is this is a real community engagement process. So we've worked really hard to make sure that we're as transparent as possible. So for example, that's our kind of our objective. We state it every time. This is our goal, to be transparent, to invite participation from the community, and we even invite community to speak at the beginning of each SIPSI meeting. We haven't had a lot of speaking guests yet, but I anticipate now that we've spoken to the board, we might see more of that. The other piece that I think that's really important is that these the subcommittees have put all of their notes on a blog, and Susan Cousins has been our chief information officer in this area. So we've posted everything from draft, even if those things get striked, we put them up, we invite community participation, even in draft form. And this has been a great way to make sure that we have a track record on our website for all of this information. So obviously we've been meeting since May, so we have quite a bit of data on this SIPSI website already. We're going to be pushing our principals a little bit in the next few months. I say that because Dr. Messenger had kind of a fire starter speaker come in our August DLT, and Dr. Frank Locker really ignited the concept of what would a 21st century building look like. And then in that process was a grid where you charted both the physical plant and the programming. And you kind of, you did some inter-rater reliability with your community on this and got people thinking about it. So it really was a beginning of a conversation. But the need now is for our project managers and our principals to also meet and vet those early percolating ideas, as well as making sure that our principals have time to engage their SACs, their faculties in a variety of ways. That's already been happening, and we would be asking our principals and our parent community to engage in these conversations January, February, and March of this year, so that by the time we come to you with this master plan, we've vetted this in many directions and have a lot of tentacles out. Obviously, building principals have access to parents in a lot of different ways, so we're going to be trying to pull that information back in to you, so we have stuff from the ground, stuff from our project managers, from our parents, and our teachers who are in the trenches, who really have a different lens on this. We want to hear about all that. Fran has also put together a listing of all of the different grants that have gone out to the schools. Some of those are very innovative. We want to capture all of the teacher work that has gone on for the last 5 to 10 years around 21st century learning. Some of those sites, those satellite sites, have really innovative thinking going on, not just with use of technology, but in programming. So we're going to be bringing that into the report as well. So we're reaching out to our Opportunity Fund and writers, et cetera, and our teachers. So in closing, I just want to say that we're going to be talking to you guys. We're going to be hosting these SIPSI meetings. You're always welcome to drop in. We invite you to take a look at the website. And obviously, we'll be using other forums like BVSD Listens and checking in on that to see if there's any people that come in through that door. And I'd like to thank Don Orr and Susan Cousins for their work. They've been attending these meetings every night. And I have to also say that our project managers have been doing overtime at these meetings. I want to thank all of our project managers. And I want to thank Andrew and his IT team. They've been in all these meetings. And also, for those of you, I just want to shout out to Michelle DeBerry, who's also come to support the athletic subcommittee. So we've had a lot of staff and community members on this. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Adam. Board members, any comments or questions? Sam?
Thank you for the hard and important work you're doing. I am daunted by how you're ultimately going to decide what to recommend. Did you say you will, at some point in the near future, create a prioritization process? You don't have that yet?
Slightly under $1 billion is our goal. And I say that tongue in cheek. I mean, when you think about those things that were not funded, in the bucket that Fran mentioned about the non-sexy kind of projects that really are needed, like roofs and parking lots and boilers, there's a pile of, that bucket is overflowing right now. That's the best way to say that. And then we have all this innovation buckets and other things and the new campus potential. So I think that our job is to give you a manageable, reasonable presentation that we can all then have a debate about and look at those priorities that come up from both the parent perspective, the teacher perspective, staff perspective. And so that's why the project managers are putting this pricing together before we even get to the prioritization time.
Which would be some kind of scoring matrix where
Yes,
values are
exactly.
assigned?
That's exactly right. And we've kept that out purposely, Sam, because if you put that in too early, a lot of things get striked off the list too early. And we wanted to allow as a process free thinking as a public committee, and then see how those projects score out.
In other words, nothing is taken off the plate right now. It's really a capital improvement discussion, and you will have access to all of the recommendations, and then we will present on the process on the prioritization. And then obviously, this is just a recommendation, so you can mix and match the buckets. We're committed to a transparent process that is very inclusive and comprehensive and is aligned to the educational mission that Dr. Messenger is working with his principals on through the strategic plan.
Thanks. Lori?
Thank you. That was a lot of information. Thanks very much. I know it's been a lot of work. You know, one thing I've been interested in, when you look at a bond and you look at capital needs, how that connects to or relates to programmatic needs. So what I wonder is when you buy this stuff and parking lots and technology and a new building, if we need to have a new building in the area and so on, what kind of expenses are associated with all of that that aren't included in the bond? Or a more direct question is, do we also need to do a mill levy at this point? How's the timing on that work?
I think we should invite up some guests to help us with this, but the truth is that there are, some of these buckets would be inappropriate to use for the purchase of programming because some of the things you might want to buy have a lifespan of 1, 2, or 3 years. So we have to be very thoughtful as we make a recommendation to you that some of those programmatic needs might be best served, even though it might be in a priority, through a mill levy or another funding stream. So we won't take those off of the list, but we would suggest that they be moved maybe to a mill levy. And there's a lot of those kinds of items that have percolated up already. And rather than say, no, let's not include those right now, even though we already might consense that those are appropriate for a mill levy, we're including those so that the board can hear about all those and decide which of those items might be best served through a potential mill levy whenever the board thinks the timing is appropriate.
So we're clear. We are not a bond committee. We're not a mill levy committee. We're a capital improvement facility committee. And we are we don't think it's our charge to come up with how this will ultimately be funded. We think it's our charge to bring you the breadth of the data and the impact. And then, Lori, if you choose to do an extension of some type of tax, I think that's a school board decision. We may recommend, but we are not a bond committee or a mill levy committee.
Thanks. Shelley?
I'd like to throw my thanks in too. It sounds like a really thoughtful process, and I really appreciate how you're keeping all the options open and not making decisions yet, so that's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks, Shelley.
So I'll add my 2 cents. I know it's an enormous amount of work for members. Oh, Jenny? So,
You're welcome to talk first.
well, let me finish. So I'll finish and then you can go. So please thank the members and continually thank them. I think the one thing, and you're dead on right with where you're going, it's just, please don't look at the politics. Please look at what our needs are. If you give us a list of needs and prioritize and everything, I think the school board will do our best to manage whatever we have to. But just ignore the politics and give us what our kids need.
Thank you, Jim. That is
Thanks,
always our
Jim.
temptation, is to try to strike those things but we know that's not our job to cut those ideas out. And it's really been a wonderful process for the community, and SIPSI's taking this very seriously. So I think you're going to get a great report.
Great. Thanks. And Jenny?
I just had a couple, thanks again for your work, and for your work in other areas for the district too, because I know this is not your only job, and both of you, and you both do great things
Our
for our
pleasure.
kids in our district, so thank you for that as well. I'm just a little concerned, I've just got some suggestions for future reports, because I see, for example, that I can go to the website and find the Security and Safety Subcommittee report.
Right.
And some of that stuff, I'm sort of hoping you won't leave till a big final report at the end, because as I read through it, and I realize it's only a draft, so I guess that was, I don't know what the thinking was in not including that in the board packet.
So we'd consider those committee working documents at this time that are for public review. When we prepare a board report, we'll consolidate those and bring them to you in that format. The monthly reports have been really just so you can track the work of the committee. So again, we're just trying not to limit it at this point. So for you or any others who can come and look at that. The reality is if we consolidate or bring it down, it'll start to move to recommendations, and we're just not at that point yet. I think what Adam laid out is that's that January to March work that will occur, so.
Okay, well, that makes sense. I understand that you could sort of, things get hardened if they get brought to the board. But I would also comment that it's possible that there are things in these reports that may amount to policy decisions on the part of the board, and I would hate to have those get lost in a big presentation. So I hope that if that happens, I'm hoping we'll get this in smaller bites eventually that are digestible for the board, so that we can recognize when there are policy things that we might have input on as a board.
So Jenny, thank you for reminding us that we will do that, to point out in the final report where there might be a recommendation that is not consistent with a board policy, and therefore you'd have to change a policy. And I know that the issues in the safety report probably have some of those topics and recommendations in, but again, we did not vet them out, we did not screen them out, they're still on the table.
No, and I actually respect that, and I think that's all in the interest of being
Right.
transparent, and I hope that the public will look at those and offer some feedback as well.
But Jeannie, we'll talk with Don and Susan when we're done. We have another meeting coming up, and we can see about how to capture those potential policy implications, and maybe we can start, because they're still early on, creating a running record of those.
Okay, and sometimes it's good just sort of visit that with the board too, so that you're not surprised
Okay.
at the very end that there are things that we as a board.
Thank you.
Yep.
And thanks, Jim, for reminding us to thank the committee. It has been a lot of work for them. They do it joyfully and with great heart, but we will remind them.
They're doing great work for us, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next and final information item, the 2013-2014 first quarter financial statements.
So Leslie Stafford, Chief Financial Officer, will provide you that report. This was also provided to the Audit Committee last week. Both Tom and Jenny were in attendance, so Leslie, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a PowerPoint popping up here. Thank you, Dr. Messenger, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm here this evening, as Jim mentioned, to present a summary of the first quarter financial statements for the 2013-14 fiscal year. As Dr. Messenger mentioned, we did present these in detail to the audit committee last week and also to BVA leadership today. This evening I'll review the results of operations for the general operating fund and then a few highlights from some of the other funds. For the general operating fund, we do show a slight increase in the first quarter deficit when you look at the ending fund balance, and this is due to the timing difference between the levy period and the collection period. We discussed that last year as to when the mills are set and when the collections come in. And while most of our property tax revenue doesn't come in until the spring, we have a fairly consistent expense pattern throughout the year, so the expenses are weighted evenly, even though the revenue is weighted in the spring. Our first quarter revenues did increase for the year about $3.5 to $3.4 million, and that's due mostly to an increased student headcount and also a slight increase in per pupil revenue. And additionally, we also had full year payments from the state of Colorado for both special education and the newly implemented READ Act. We had about $300,000. And so all those together brought up our current year revenues. For general operating fund expenditures, at the end of the first quarter, we're at about $55.2 million in total expenses, and that's an increase of about $4.9 million. Personnel costs as a percentage of the total expenses have dropped a little bit to 90%. They were at 91.6% last year, and that's due to higher than usual non-personnel costs. I think it's about 25% this year, and that is because of the math textbook adoption. So that really weighted those expenses, and there were carryover funds in that amount. But overall, first quarter results of operations for the general fund are on track with budget. For other funds, we have a couple of highlights. First, in the risk management fund, costs associated with the September 2013 flood, we're going to run most of those through the risk management fund. So we've added a line item for that, and we'll run both the revenue we hope to receive and the expenses that we incur through this fund, and you'll see that as a part of the budget presentation tonight, later this evening. The flood did have impacts on some of the other funds, the revenue in particular. For the transportation fund, local revenues decreased for the activity funds for canceled trips. We had about 190 trips that were canceled, which turns out to be about $40,000 in lost revenue for that fund. I am working with the district's insurance providers in FEMA to cover our expenses, but covering lost revenue is a little bit trickier, and so we may not be able to recover that. For the food services fund, that fund was also impacted by the flood with 4 service days of less revenue. So we weren't collecting revenue on those 4 days, however, we were paying employees. We also, with the later start to the year, had 4 days less in this first quarter. We will make those days up later in the year, but that meant 8 less service days in the food service fund, with a total for the flood of about $140,000 lost in revenue for the food services fund. The good news was personnel expenditures and food costs were down. Most of that was due to the 4 days of the late start. For the health insurance fund, plan contributions did increase by about $530,000, and that was due to the negotiated increase of 7.5%. That began July 1st. Also on July 1st, we changed our prescription plan provider. We went from Express Scripts to Cigna, and so when you look at that line item, the claims are processed more quickly now, and so while expenses are a little bit higher, that's again a timing difference. So for the other funds, we have fairly typical activity. It's only a couple of months into the school year, so there's not much information yet in the first quarter, but basically we're on target with budget projections for the other funds. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate the way you separated out for us the flood impacts. So, board members, comments or questions? And audit committee first.
I didn't realize Tom was not going to be here. Yeah, we had a really good presentation. Again, I'd like to thank our civilian who attends these meetings, Jim Topping, who always has good suggestions for transparency of presentation. And I think this was fairly straightforward. I'm always grateful. Every time I go to an audit committee meeting, I'm grateful that we have such capable staff that can that can do this work for us, so that we can have confidence in the results that are being presented to the board, or the information that is being presented to the board. Let me say it that way.
Thanks, Jenny. Sam?
When we're going to know, or do we know when we're going to know how much insurance and FEMA are going to cover?
Well, we know it'll take a while, but we have had most of our major expenses have already incurred, and so we're working carefully. We have had advances from our insurance company. We had a $500,000 advance and then $1 million advance, and so we've gotten that so far. We are working with FEMA. Don Orr's staff is working carefully with them. I hope to have everything done by the end of this fiscal year. I think we'll know much more by mid-year as to where we're going to land on the insurance, and then FEMA will kick in after that. And so hopefully that's not overly optimistic.
I do remember one question that came up in audit that I can't remember the answer to. I think it was Tom's question, actually, about how the new federal health care requirements are going to affect us in terms of our health care provisions for our staff.
Right. Not much right now. I think Bob Jamison's planning on coming to present some information at some point to the board. I could be wrong on that, but not much right now. We already have some pretty generous benefit provisions in that staff who are half-time or greater get full benefits. And so I think it'll be interesting to see over the next few years how the exchanges work and then how we might be able to access those and use those as we struggle with having affordable dependent care premiums, and so the choices we might have in the next few years.
All right, well, thank you, Leslie. Again, amazing work considering the flood we had and all the hustle everyone has done to keep our kids in school, and to see the impacts, at least at this point, well managed. Good job, thank you. So our next item tonight is action items consent grouping, which tonight consists of personnel items, approval of minutes, acceptance of donation Foothill Elementary, acceptance of donation El Dorado K-8, acceptance of donation Mesa Elementary, acceptance of donation Whittier Elementary, approval of contract for intergovernmental service agreement between BVSD and the City of Boulder, award of contract for Crestview Elementary carpet replacement, cancellation of the November 26th board meeting, permission for an employee to sell products to the district, service agreement BVSD and the City of Boulder, grant curriculum and instruction elementary physical activity Kaiser Permanente, grant human resources student echo passes and activities Kaiser Permanente, grant superintendent's office project serve flood relief Colorado Department of Education. I need a motion. Jenny, seconded by Lori. Does anybody want to pull any item from consent? Are there any questions or comments on any items on consent?
What a meeting.
Shelley?
I just have a couple of minor questions. The first one's about the employee that wants to sell products to the district. Is that established some sort of precedent, or is that something we do all the time when this comes up?
So it is not a precedent. We have had this occur. My understanding, it doesn't occur very often. Leslie, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. We have a board policy that governs when staff are allowed to sell goods or services to the district. And so when employees want to sell goods to the district, they do need to go for board approval. And so it doesn't happen very often, but when they would like to do that, we bring it to you for your approval.
And the other question I have is about the agreement with the City of Boulder for prevention services. I noticed this the last time this contract came up last year, and I'm just curious about the timing. I mean, shouldn't this come to the board before the contract's effective?
Dr. Pilch, do you want to address that?
It should. You're absolutely right. It should. And between their legal department and our administration, we're just now getting this contract. You might recall that you approved the County of Boulder's contract, I think, 2 meetings ago. And we're just getting the city's contract at this time.
So this is unusual? I mean, just,
No.
Because I
No,
remember
it's
this
not
happening
unusual.
last year too, I think,
Yeah,
with this same contract.
it's not unusual. We'll keep working on it.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? If not, Sandy, we would call the vote.
Albright?
Yes.
Belleville?
Yes.
Benford? Fuqua?
Yes.
Marquis? Myers?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Sandy. Our next item is action items policies KI, KFA, KBBA, and KFD. I need a motion. Lori, seconded by Jenny. Melissa, Dr. Messenger?
So Melissa Barber, District Council, will briefly present what we think we did. We attempted to do was to take the input, the comment you gave when this item was before you as a study item and incorporated those. So what you found attached to your agenda were the updated policy. Melissa, I don't know if you want to comment on the red line, but I think it's also pretty explanatory, the changes that were made, but we'd welcome your comments and questions on that, and also if you see other things that we should address. So, Melissa.
And looking back through the attachments, it might actually be a little bit difficult to tell what was new from the red line from last time. So taking the comments that we heard, looking at KI, the visitors to the schools policy, we did try and make it a little more welcoming in the language. So in the second paragraph and then at the last paragraph on that page, there was a little bit friendlier language offered. Also in the second paragraph, bullet 3, there was some discussion around, it used to say other persons invited by the district for official business purposes, so there was some discussion about whether that's kind of too narrow, so we took off that last phrase, other persons invited by the district. Those were the only changes we made to that since the last time you all met. The public conduct on district property policy, KFA, the only change I made there was to address Tom's comment around the 1,000 feet. It was in item 5 around the drug use and maybe picking up private property, and that was broken out into paragraph 6 to more closely align with this federal law. So it's intent to distribute within this 1,000 area, and that would pick up private residences because that's the way the law is worded. So clarification on that. And those are the only changes that we made since the last time we were here.
Thank you, Melissa. I guess we can go to board members if there's comments or questions. Shelley?
And I just thought of one other thing too. We did delete, now that you're getting ready to speak, I remember you had mentioned an issue about this language in the first visitors policy around efficiency in the schools, and we had taken out that phrase, and that it didn't change the meaning. That was in the last paragraph as well.
Okay. Shelley?
I still think it could be friendlier, but, I mean, I definitely see your attempt. I think in that last paragraph, it says, while the district values family and community involvement in the schools. I think it would be nice if we put that up in front and said the Board of Education does value family and community involvement in the schools. It's like we say all this stuff that we are and are not going to do, and then at the bottom, after we've told them.
But the first sentence still says the Board of Education encourages parents and community members to visit the schools.
It does, and that's an improvement, so I do appreciate that. I have a question about what this could possibly mean, this sentence. School administrators may approve additional building procedures pertaining to school visitors to preserve a proper and safe learning environment. What do you anticipate a school administrator might do in addition to all the other things we've outlined?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is our buildings are so different in the way they're constructed, the way the entryways work, and the different kinds of systems for buzzing people in. I mean, that's what comes to mind for me, that there's going to be unique things at each school. So this is kind of a floor.
So you don't see anything like a dramatic departure that one principal would do, that, like metal detectors or wands or police in the lobby, or like, I mean, you're imagining small things that are just
More
adjustments
procedural.
to their facility. Okay. I think that's it, other than some wording stuff.
Let me just maybe add just on to Melissa's response to Shelley. I think that what you'll see in the Capital Improvement Planning Committee report in the spring is around the safety and security. Some of the challenges we still face are some of the structural designs of buildings. And so I think as we over time have more consistency in the entryway to buildings, the way we welcome guests and visitors to our school, that we can even have less need for discretion, because truly, really when we find ourselves in these situations, it's just because we still have some buildings that are well down that path because of the last bond issue as far as how to welcome and secure the building, and others, and some of you are very familiar with those buildings. We just aren't in a very good position to do that. So we're using some alternative strategies to try to manage safe school environment, also recognizing that the building was probably never designed to do what we're trying to get it to do right now. So I think that'll be a help we have in time. And again, some of it may relate to policy, which we talked about earlier, and we'll bring that back if it does.
Okay. I want to stay with Shelley here.
Just another question about that policy. There's language in here about when parents and community members are invited to attend large events. And I just wondered about that language of invited, because, you know, if there's a big football game, it's not like people are invited to that, they just attend it. So I don't know if,
Well, public events, that is, I mean, that's a way of referring to that. When events are open to the public, you're
we say we're
basically
inviting people?
invitees onto
Okay.
the property.
Right. And then as far as KFA is concerned, the public conduct, I mean, we're well aware that, especially at the high schools, I'm just looking at the things that are prohibited, that, I mean, there's a lot of kids smoking on the high school grounds, and there are actually designated places that the kids have designated for doing that sort of thing. And I'm just wondering if by, you know, and I'm not saying that that's right, I'm just saying that by putting this down in policy, does that mean we are going to go out and enforce that now, when we have not been for many years? And I have the same question about profanity, which I brought up last time. I'm not saying these are the wrong things to put in there. I'm just saying you are going to get somebody coming to you and saying that a teacher dropped a book on her foot and said something profane, and now it's here in policy that we need to do something about that. Or a coach said something that they say every single practice, they said it again, and now they're going to be brought forward. And I'm fine with that. I'm just pointing out that we need to be
I mean,
ready
these
to
are
be
expectations that are set in the policy. At the same time, it's not describing or dictating what the response to that is going to be, the level of reaction, whether it's disciplinary or, you know, some other kind of reaction. I think the expectation is what's in here.
So if we get parents contacting us and saying, the coach of my son's football team did this, and we look at this policy, and it's in policy that they should not have been doing that, what is going to be the board's response to
Well,
that?
I would
Or the
encourage you to
district's
direct it to the
response.
appropriate level. Our obligation.
District's response.
Our obligation is to investigate the situation. If in fact we find any employee in violation of district policy, we have an obligation to consequence the employee. If we have students in violation of district policy, we have the same obligation. So we cannot, should not ignore that. And so we have an obligation to investigate. Now, what we know is that sometimes people hear and see things in different ways. So sometimes it's not affirmed, but we absolutely have an obligation to investigate those and take appropriate intervention.
And so you will have an internal matrix of consequences for
We
these
already
things?
do.
Okay.
And it's a progressive discipline for both students and staff.
Okay, thank you. Lori? Oh. Yeah.
Sure. I was going to say, I think you've cleaned this up and really listened to what the board said at the last meeting and reflected, I think, what the intent was, and I feel real comfortable about it. Shelley, I was thinking about your comments about, and I've sort of lost it here, but some buildings may handle some things differently. When you have a great big high school and you've got a couple of different security people in the building, sometimes you might have one door. I mean, not everybody will absolutely always go through the front door, but sometimes you'll have a security person at the back door, and sometimes you won't. And so sometimes the door will be locked, and sometimes it won't. So I think it just sort of depends. That I like the idea of having principals having some discretion and some different authority to move the staff around as appropriate. So I felt comfortable with it here.
Thanks, Lori. Jenny?
So this is a question for staff. We have designated smoking areas at our high schools where students are permitted to go and smoke?
We do not. We do not. We do not.
So the kids have designated, I don't understand.
The kids decide where they're gonna go and do that, and it's well known where they do that.
And administration doesn't do anything about
I
it?
don't know what they do.
I don't think Shelley said that.
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay.
I did not say that.
Oh, okay. So it's okay to make it against policy because we don't currently really allow it. Okay. I was just puzzled by that.
It's tobacco, right?
Well, another
Any
debate.
comments? Sam?
Yeah, I appreciate my board colleague. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I shared your concerns about the language in KI, and thank you for raising that, and thank you for softening it a bit. I'm comfortable with the way it is now, but I take your point about, we want to be maximally welcoming to our parent community, and I think schools can and should and are doing a lot to welcome the community in. So as long as we do that as much as possible, we can live with the language of this policy for when someone is, abusing that privilege.
Thanks, and I'll agree with Sam. I was also absent the last meeting, but when I read this policy now, I get the overwhelming feeling that we're protecting our kids. So I like that. It's also, community, you're welcome in, but if you're going to do that, you got to realize we're an education system first, and our kids come first, but you're still welcome. And so I really liked the tone that this ended up with. So thank you very much. So if there's no other comments or questions, Sandy, would you call the vote? Yep, it's an action item.
Albright?
Yes.
Belleville?
Yes.
Benford? Fuqua?
Yes.
Marquis? Myers?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Melissa, thank you for the presentation. Forgot to thank you when you're there. So our next item, and I think we'll just try and keep rolling right here, study item 2013-14 revised budget.
Agenda is this update, the revised budget for your review prior to the meeting, and Bill's prepared to give some overview comments and also answer any questions that you might have. Bill, thank you.
So, thank you. I will keep this quite brief. Just walking through the attachment to the agenda item. First page is the title page, General Operating Fund. Page 2 is the summary of the General Operating Fund and the revised budget as proposed. The one item to note, I think on this page, is the bottom right-hand corner, just above the shaded section, $1.7 million as a budgeted ending fund balance. So this proposal does include an ending fund balance built into the budget. The budget adopted in June did not have an ending balance, it was zeroed out. As well, also of note, last year in the 12-13 budget, I think it was about a $2 million budgeted ending fund balance, so this is not particularly uncommon of a practice to do this. The next page just summarizes all the revenues. Page 4, the area to focus here is about halfway down the page on the right-hand side, lists the items that are sort of broken out and identified as expenditures changing in this revised budget. We have our carryover items. So again, as we build the budget that's adopted in June, we do not project to expend all the available resources at the school level or department level if there is some discretion over those expenditures. So these would be items, textbooks, school resource allocation, and department funds that have more opportunity to not be spent in the second half of the year. Non-standard carryover items, these include items that either were received just after the end of the last fiscal year, so the funds weren't expended in the prior year and come in, say, in July or August. Some additional one-time expenditures built into this budget, as well as some ongoing expenditures. The next page is a summary of all the changes that reconciles the adopted budget to this ending balance of $1.7 million. So additional resources coming into the general fund. some beginning fund balance, again, mostly associated with the carryover items not being spent out. Ongoing revenue, we did have projected additional students and some slight changes in revenue line items. The READ Act funding, we did not have built into the June adopted budget, and it's built into this budget, as well as Medicaid. We bumped up the Medicaid dollars. The additional one-time revenue, we have received our notification on credits and abatements for property taxes. That number's going up quite a bit above what we had budgeted in the June budget. But based on historical trends, it doesn't look like that's going to be a continued revenue stream, so we want to capture it as one-time dollars. The expenditures, again, reiterating what I listed from the previous page. Carryover, special carryover request, one-time request, and ongoing expenditures. As we have additional expenditures in the budget, we have taper and contingency built on those. Other reserves, that's the warehouse inventory, so as we project the growth in warehouse inventory, we have to reserve those funds. And then some slight changes in transfers, both one-time and ongoing there. So again, that's the reconciliation between what was adopted in June and what's built into this revised budget. And the next page, page 6, is the reconciliation for policy DB that calculates the ongoing funding available versus one-time funding available. So of that $1.7 million that's budget ending fund balance, 1.5 of that, just over, is ongoing funds that are expected to continue into the future. So we're building a very small hedge against the future inflation costs that we're expected going into next year. And then we've identified the various carryover items and one-time expenditures built into the budget. The next large section in the packet relates to the other funds. Generally speaking, those just have to do with how the particular fund ended the year and building those ending fund balances into the next year's budget. No real significant items to note there. Perhaps transportation is a little bit of note. They did end the year with a little bit of a balance, which allowed us to build in some funding to buy a couple extra buses this year. So with that, are there any questions?
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill. Any comments or questions? Jenny?
So when I think about a budget, I mean, I trust you all to do the numbers correctly, and I ask myself as a board member, are we gonna balance the budget at the end of the year? We're not gonna end the, well, actually, not even that. We're not gonna end the year in the red. And the budget continues to support our policies and our mission, vision, and goals, even though we haven't got a strategic plan yet. And I think this budget those are sort of issues we wrestled with at the end of last year. So, and as far as I can tell, this budget continues to do that. So thank you for bringing this to us and staying on top of stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I second Jenny's emotion. So thanks for this. And again, I'm sure the flood has caused a number of rejuggling all around. So thanks for your continued work for putting everything back together again. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill.
So our final study item tonight is the 2014 BBSD legislative platform.
So Briggs Gamblin, Director of Communications and Governmental Relations, is making his way to the podium, and we have a couple guests that are with us this evening. They're really not guests anymore, they're our colleagues, and but they're guests this evening to our board meeting, and I'll ask Briggs to introduce them to you. As you know, this is a platform that we did major remodeling on before the last review, and we have it back for you this evening with some changes that you had a chance to review prior to the meeting in the agenda, and you may have some further suggestions. This is not listed as an action item. We plan to have it back for final approval in December is our plan, and also we hope this will give us some direction as we engage our local legislators who will be meeting with us in a work session 1 week from tonight. So again, we thank you for all the comment and input you've offered to date, and we consider that door still open as we finalize this. So Briggs, if you would, please.
Thank you, Dr. Messenger. Also ask the control room, if possible, if we can put this, I've put it on the computer screen here, if we can get it up for our viewers if they want to see. But I'd like to introduce Tanya Kelly Bowery and Ernestine Mondragon of Policy Matters. They have for several years now been representing the Boulder Valley School District at the Colorado General Assembly, and we always talk about being the best or among the best in Boulder Valley, and this is also shown at the legislature, where we have what is universally acknowledged by legislators, including all of our legislative delegation, as the best legislative representation at the State House in K-12 education. So we're very glad that Tanya and Ernestine could join us. Bruce and I and others rely, the board liaisons and others rely a lot on their day-to-day updates from the Capitol, and information more than money is a big is what gets the job done at the Capitol, and we have the best information, and we have it in the most timely fashion. So delighted they're here. Thank you very much for your work at the October 15th work session. We have incorporated, Dr. Messenger and I worked very hard to incorporate your suggestions. I talked to a couple of you on the phone. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I also am aware that there may still be some comments from board members about both substantively and stylistically. There are two I would indicate for you and for those watching that there were two further recommended changes that were conveyed to me that arose out evidently from the board's retreat with Dr. Messenger and Dr. Pilch that was facilitated by CASB. One was the creation for the first time, thank you to board member Shelley Benford, for the first time a plank on student privacy. So under student privacy, it says that we oppose legislation that makes it the responsibility of the school district to provide data at the individual student level on achievement, discipline, health, and other areas where a legitimate need to know has not been established by the state. The other change that came out of information given to me from the retreat is under employment, plank 4.2. We oppose legislation linking educator licensure to local performance evaluation ratings. And that language we want to give credit for authorship to the Colorado Association of School Boards. And then if you look at the other change I'd point out, and then take comments and questions, and we also have Tanya and Ernestine if you need more detail. I did come across, when I was doing research, I came across some language in CASB's legislative report that really tracks with our 1.1, but perhaps has even stronger language about local control. So we went ahead, after discussing it with Dr. Messenger, we decided to simply put it in there and let you give us guidance whether you wanted us to use that language or just stick with what's already there in 1.1. We're not pushing one or the other. We just thought that it was very well written and perhaps a little more in tracking in the tone that came out of the October 15th work session. So with that, I'd like to take your questions and comments.
Well, thank you, Briggs. Questions and comments? Tina?
Thanks for this. This is great. And I just had one comment, one question. One question I have is whether there's an opportunity or whether there's a need to talk about flexibility and asking for clear processes to get exemptions or modifications from pieces of legislation where BVSD could demonstrate that we already are in spirit completing that legislation, so that we may have it doing the same thing but a different way. But
I might defer to our lobbyists on this, but I will say that generally we've approached that, seek that kind of flexibility in the regulatory process that follows the legislative process. So we have had different pieces of legislation that have passed at the Capitol, then been referred to the Colorado Department of Education, the State Board of Education, for development of a regulatory package to implement that legislation. And quite often that regulatory package, not quite often, but occasionally that regulatory package will include the flexibility you're talking about and the ability of a district that may meet certain conditions to be able to opt out. But it's not that common, and it's sometimes difficult to do, but it's certainly, there's no reason, that's what you would like us to pursue. That's Ken. I don't know, Tanya, would you want to add anything to that? Or? Okay.
I think it's Tanya Kelly Bowery with Policy Matters. Congratulations and welcome. It's actually a great question. As a matter of fact, Ernestine and I just had a meeting today with the other K-12 lobbyists, sort of getting ready for the session, and one of the things that we talked about is, are there flexibilities that we can go after, given the passage of Amendment 66 didn't go on, and there have been a number of different pieces of legislation that have gone through, that there was not funding attached to it, and so looking at that for K-12, are there certain flexibilities we can look at? It is, as Briggs mentioned, it is challenging to sort of get one district exempted when they're doing a statewide law in terms of some of those flexibilities. But I think it's always a conversation that we can have to say, if we're at meeting or exceeding expectations for why this mandate is put into place, to have those conversations. But I think the political process is dynamic, and one of the things that we're constantly up against is sort of wanting to work collaboratively with our K-12 partners and not just make exemptions for the school district, because sometimes we need each other collaboratively on some of the other big issues. But I think it's a case-by-case basis. And certainly, one of the conversations that we had today was, are there things that you could look at in terms of flexibilities where we have met expectations? Is that helpful?
That's extremely helpful, thank you.
Great.
Yeah. And then I'll just comment, I like the new language on Plank 1.1. Personally, I like the strength. I guess it's adding that piece about not legislated at the state or federal level that feels a little stronger to me.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tina. Additional comments or questions? Jenny?
Hi, thanks for your hard work for us. So I do have a follow-up question to Tina's question, which is, are there things that we can look for in the way of flexibility? Did you come to any conclusions in your conversation?
We didn't. Today was just kind of a throw spaghetti up on the wall and kind of feel where everybody's districts are, and just have it be a thought, or is this where we want to go? So I think no real specifics were put down, but we did have the conversation about, should we go back to our boards and to our superintendents and just take a look. I think we're still so new to, as you all know, you probably got our report, the governor came out with his budget with regard to the K-12 funding, and we were kind of waiting to see what happened with the election as well, because that's sometimes predicated. I think the big issue will be, the next big issue will be what happens with the next December 20th forecast, because I think then we'll be able to see how much revenue is coming into the state and what new revenue potentially we could look at spending. And then I think we'll be able to have a more informed conversation with you all about potential flexibilities, or if there's potentially new money that we may want to look at strategizing about going after for all of K through 12. But I do think one of the other lobbyists was like, maybe we should just try to come up with or look at some different ideas. So I think we're going to have some conversations and just see what legislators are thinking before the session starts, to hopefully get some thoughts for you guys on that. So thank you for that question.
So then I have one more question for staff and for our lobbyists, which is, does this platform give us and give you the flexibility you need to respond more quickly to things as they come up?
So I'll offer my perspective. I'd welcome Briggs to do the same. I think the work we did upon your request was to really sort of shake this out and start again, so we were able to incorporate the good work the board and the community did last year with our goals, vision, mission. So that's very helpful to us. And I also think some of the really candid conversations we've had in the couple of years that I've worked with you about things that really reflect our values. And I think, Tina's comment to this alternate plank of 1.1, the issue around licensure. So yeah, I think it really sets us in a good place to start the session. Some of what we talked about in our planning session a week ago was that as issues arise, maybe more proactively coming back to the board during the session and seeking additional guidance once detail comes forward. So the comment on licensure here is one that we really do believe there's a chance it'll be associated to teacher or to employment evaluation. So we think that's good to have this here. But there might well be other things included in that licensure bill or other legislation that we really might need to come back and seek additional guidance on, because we want to be active and proactive around these issues going forward. And I really do think school funding will be paramount. I appreciate Tanya's comments about the December forecast. As I mentioned in my opening comments, I am concerned that the governor's initial proposed budget doesn't give a proportionate amount of funding to K-12 education to keep pace with the growth of the budget, which that JBC report came after the outcome of the Amendment 66 vote. And so funding at 37% is what the governor has proposed in this next session. If 66 had passed, we'd have been obligated to go to 43%. So I guess my question is, where's that other 5 or 6%? Where would it have come from, and where is it today? And so I just think we need to hit that door hard. And I think the December projections will indicate continued growth in revenue for our state. And I don't think we need to take the back seat. We're still $1 billion under where we should be with funding in the negative factor. So it has absolutely nothing to do with Amendment 66. It has honoring the commitment that the legislature wasn't able to do in 2009, 2010, that we need to begin to figure a plan to buy back that negative factor. And I think we should start this session.
And the only thing I would add, agree with all of that. I think that, and ask Tanya to speak to this a little bit, the other challenge we'll have is really also in our relationship building. For the first, while the good news is the Boulder Valley School District Legislative Delegation, that those legislators, those 4 state senators and 4 state representatives whose districts overlap wholly or partially with BVSD's boundaries. We have both the Senate Majority Leader in Senator Raleigh Heath, the new Senate Majority Leader, and we have the returning House Majority Leader in Dickie Lee Hollinghorse. But for the first time in my 8 years in Boulder Valley School District, we have nobody from our delegation on either Education Committee or the Joint Budget Committee. So we're going to have to reach beyond our delegation and build some strong, not just the regular relationships, which are pretty good, but strong working relationships with with key legislators who are not only in our delegation but outside of our delegation, because as Tanya and Ernestine and I were talking in the hallway, a lot of these things, critical amendments, come up on the spur of the moment in the hallway, and they don't come up in caucus. They don't come up with enough time for the board to give it the thoughtful consideration you'd like to give it. And we don't have someone at the table who's automatically running out to the hallway to check and see how BVSD feels about it. So we have to, that's going to be an extra challenge for Tanya and Ernestine, and maybe Tanya could just speak to for real quickly.
Yes, we're already, we do have a backup plan. Ernestine is like, we got to go to get Senator Andy Kerr. He's going to be our go-to for BVSD this year because he's staying on the Senate Ed Committee. But I think one of the other pieces that we're really going to have to proactively do is to work proactively ahead of time with both majority leaders to sort of give direction to some of the caucus members that are representing them on the committees. But as Briggs mentioned, it is very challenging because, as you all know, you've been down there, you've seen it. You've got to have somebody sometimes in the room, and you can't run and get someone to have them weigh in. So we are looking at that, but I think it's important for the board to know that that's going to make it tougher, I think, for us to do our jobs. But I would really like to echo what our superintendent said in terms of this document, and I'd like to thank the board because since I've worked here, this document is a very fluid document. We really go through, we scrap it, we update it, we change depending on which legislation has come through. There have been many iterations of this, which I think has been really helpful to us in our lobbying strategy at the Capitol, and so I really do appreciate the time because I know it's time sensitive that goes into this. Ernestine and I typically, we provide these to our legislators, and they actually put them in their bill files. They take them out, they refer to our platforms. So it's not just a piece of paper that gets lost down there, and they really do pay attention to it. So I think keeping it fluid is critical, and these are good guidelines for us to know where the board is, which gives us the leeway to negotiate when we need to on those seconds by having the reassurance that you're backing us up when we have to negotiate those deals. And then as Bruce and Briggs know, we're basically on the phone quite a bit with them, and they always answer our calls, which we're also very, very grateful for, because sometimes things come up at sort of a million miles an hour.
Thanks. Comments, questions, Shelley?
Can we go back to the governance plank for a minute? Thank you.
Yes.
I agree with Tina that the language in CASB about not being legislated at the state or federal level is stronger, but I believe the beginning that says BVSD believes is actually weaker than our plank. And the fact is that we may believe it, but it's mandated by the Colorado State Constitution. So I would like something stronger at the very beginning that says BVSD supports the mandate established by the Colorado State Constitution, that control of public systems, and then go into that. Because I don't think it matters what we believe, it matters what the law is, and the law is that we have local control.
I agree, and so I think we can most of that text, and we can definitely change that opening to
Something a
to
little
convey
stronger.
to convey not that what we believe, but what we understand to be a constitutional certainty.
Exactly. And then the only other thing I would suggest is that we take out the word oversight in the last line there, provide effective oversight. We don't just provide oversight, we actually create educational programs and curriculum, and we have responsibility for that. So I think oversight just makes it too weak again.
So the way I understand I believe then that sentence would now read, local school boards are elected by their committees or by their communities to ensure accountability in meeting student needs, provide effective educational programs, and determine the efficient use of
Yes.
resources. Is that correct?
That's what I would do.
Okay. I think, I'm assuming that there's board consensus on both.
Well, let's go to Sam.
I don't want to assume something that's not true, so.
No, I think there is,
Because
but-
we need to bring it to you as a final item in December.
No, I'm just going to say, so what about when we like something the state is going to mandate?
Well, we have local control over whether we adopt it or not.
Nothing about our stand in local control, I believe, prohibits us from supporting a state initiative if we believe it serves the local vision, mission, goals of this school district as reflected by your board action.
I just wanted to hear somebody say that.
Well, I'm glad I did.
And we have it
that for you.
recorded, so we can listen to it.
That's right, and you can go back and hear me say it over and over again.
Thanks, Sam. Lori?
Yeah, thank you. And it's nice to see Tanya and Ernestine. Thanks for coming and to our meeting. I had a question about the student privacy plank, and I'm particularly worried about the last line. It says, or any other area where a legitimate need to know has not been, and these are the words I'm worried about, been established by the state. So I'm just wondering, what would happen if in a criminal situation where a student might be charged with something, it hasn't been necessarily established by the state? I guess I'm looking for what the definition of state is, as opposed to of a court, or it just seems like that might be a loophole somehow, because we're only referring to just the state. Is that the Constitution or statute or a district attorney or what?
I would defer on this one. I'd defer to Shelley as the author. And I wasn't privy to the discussion this came out of your discussion.
Well, okay, so I agree with what the intent is that we will keep student data private, except, and this is the question maybe our lawyer might have ideas about, how to protect that and how to say it in a really positive way and in an all-inclusive way, rather than just has been established by the state. still not sure what the state means.
So Lori, I don't think, so it's a legislative platform. So while legal advice might be good, perhaps we could hold on legal advice on that. But just kind of point that back to our lobbyists, and kind of say, you know, the intent was certainly, you know, to protect student privacy. And really, it was kind of, we want to make sure that that bar's, you know, they're not just saying, hey, give it to us, and we do. We're saying, why do you want it again, and what is it going to be used for? Oh, it is going to be used for something. So
Again, the way I understood, I can only tell you how I understood the intent, and then I defer to you all. I took it to mean, especially in the area of, because one thing we want to, Bruce has talked about, and we want to be more active in, is the regulatory process. And so if a regulatory entity of the state, agency of state, usually Department of Education in our case, is going to seek this data, we want it to have, as I understood this language, we'd want it to have a clear legal authority, something set forth in state law saying, or a court order, or something that establishes, as opposed to simply at the regulatory level saying, we think we need this, think we want this. I'll defer to Shelley because you wrote it, but that's the way I read it when I got the language from you.
Yeah, that was exactly the intent, and it actually didn't come out of the board retreat, it came out of the DAC discussion
It came up,
around this.
okay,
Yeah.
I correct that,
Yeah.
and it was the District Accountability Committee discussion.
Thanks, Bruce.
So this is in response to the Colorado Department of Education's querying information about our students, and we think not on a need-to-know basis, and we think not founded by Colorado state law. So we have and plan to push back. And so this gives us some support to do this. And if there's information needed on students, any of it can be subpoenaed. And then there's a burden of proof by the agency that would subpoena that. And I think most agencies, the DA, any of them would say that's a burden they carry and should. That we really have an obligation to protect the privacy of students. And if we have information regarding around student conduct or information that was shared to us by parents and the role we assume in working with parents, or incidents that we deal with in our school, we absolutely think that should be protected through privacy rights. And we shouldn't have agencies that just go trolling for information so that it's in some database. So at some point, if they want to do a correlationary study of whatever, they've got the data. We just think, staff-wise, we think that's inappropriate. And the feedback we received the evening at DAC would indicate we aren't alone in thinking that. So we just want to start putting some pushback on this, and have already initiated that with the department. And I do think in this case, it probably will be the State Board of Education that oversees the Colorado Department. This really is not a legislative issue, but sometimes these platforms are helpful to us as we manage that. But any data that's really needed can be subpoenaed. And so we would trust that an appropriate enforcement agency would do that if they need that data.
Lori, does that help? Okay.
Yeah, I think, Briggs, when you spoke about it, I think it was really clear that that was the intent. And I think it's fine.
So for me, I do like the alternative Plank 1.1. I like clarifying it and solidifying it a little bit. I think it goes beyond believe. We've sued the state for that even. So we put action behind it in teeth. So I like that. The student privacy I like. I like the addition of 4.2. I think in general, this looks like a really great legislative platform, and I'm glad we've gone through the restructuring, resetting of it to include the conversations that we had with the community all last year about what turned into our vision, mission, and goals, but at the time was, what do you want for your schools? So thank you for your work, and look forward to our work session next week. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and I would let you know that we have received RSVPs from every one of our legislative delegations, save one, and we'll reach out to her and try one more time. And also from our State Board of Education member. So this is actually, in my 8 years here, this is our best turnout.
Great.
We'll have next week, so we're pretty happy about that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
Nice.
Briggs.
I will point out one more thing. When we were talking about not having a BVSD or a representative from BVSD, Senator Hudak has always been a friend of education and a friend of BVSD, and, I'm fighting that recall, but as long as that doesn't happen, I imagine we might be able to bend her ear on occasion, too. All right, thanks again. Our last item of the evening is agenda setting, so if anybody had agenda topics. No. Okay, otherwise, I'll remind everyone that next week at 4 o'clock, we'll be back here for the special work session, a special board meeting, and at 5 o'clock, we'll start our work session with the legislators. Thank you.